Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Fan Appreciation Month here on Reaction and Review. Tonight, guys, I'm checking out a found footage anthology film from 2014. That movie is VHS Viral. Now, for those of you who've been following my channel for a long time, you know I have a soft spot for this franchise. I've covered the first two VHS films, and I really liked the both of them, minus the second story in each one. For some reason, this series stumbles when it gets up to the second tape viewed in each film. I'm certainly hoping that VHS Viral is able to buck that trend. I certainly hope that VHS Viral is able to be as fun and as awesome as the first two films, and the only way I'm going to find out if this sucker is any good at all is if I shut up and I push play, and I'm going to do that right now. So, without further ado, it's time to kick back, relax, and check out VHS Viral. Well, guys, we're off to a little bit of a bad start. Allow me to explain. Do you know what I liked about the first two films? The fact that everything still felt like a natural found footage thing. This thing here doesn't feel like a found footage anything. This just sort of feels like a bunch of like shaky cam jump cut bullshit with static like between everything. And it feels kind of like it's trying to intercut between like maybe four different tapes. But it doesn't feel like a found footage film. It just feels like some poorly edited piece of garbage with a ton of shaky cam. This is not what I signed up for when I threw in a movie in the fucking VHS franchise. I wanted something that felt like an actual found footage film. You know what I mean, guys? What the hell happened to this series, guys? I remember VHS priding itself on being a found footage series. We are now up to the second story. Mind you, second story so far, really good. That's, at least it's far better than that terrible first one. But it's not found footage. Again, it's VHS, but it's not found footage. It's a fucking documentary which features a little bit of found footage stuff in it. Okay, and I just saw our magician Dante just skin a fucking rabbit magically. That was sort of cool. And the special effects are kind of nice, and okay, yeah, you know, we see a little bit of, you know, like, home fucking video stuff, but still we're seeing a lot of, like, news footage and documentary fucking interviews. Not the shit you expect in a found footage film. I totally understand, guys, I should probably just leave that, like, leave that be and accept that this is no longer a found footage franchise, but that was the gimmick that made VHS work, and the fact that this thing has seemingly dumped it off kind of feels like a little bit of a betrayal. This isn't a VHS film. But I'm still hoping for it to be good. I really am. So wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me that first story, what I thought was the first story, is the framing device for this? Instead of actually being like a framing device but finding all the tapes and all that shit, it's just some random thing we're just going to cut to before we go to all the news stories. That seems incredibly flimsy and shit, guys. My God, this thing here, guys, is really cutting corners in every way possible. But that also means that awesome story we had with the wizard and his cloak, that means that wasn't the second story. Oh my God, the next one could probably suck, dear God. I really now, guys, am kind of sort of afraid of what the hell this movie is going to dole out next. Well, at least that was sort of interesting. Still, I dread to see what the next story is. Okay, I was not expecting demon penis monsters. I also didn't know that Alfonso had a screwdriver with which to stab one of these demon penis monsters with. Well, you know what, guys? I was worried about the second story and this thing being shit, as has been the pattern with previous VHS films. Well, the story doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. At least it's different. At least I'm willing to say that. It's kind of interesting in a nonsensical kind of way, but you know, the fact that the demon penis monsters came out of left fucking field, I think that might have saved this a little bit. Well, guys, good news. We finally have a proper found footage segment in this film. Yeah, guys, VHS is finally going back to its roots. We finally have a found footage segment. The problem, the dialogue is shit. I don't care about any of these skater burnout losers. None of them know how to improv for shit, and that's obvious as hell because there's certainly no script here. I can't wait for this story to end. Either that or this story had better get real fucking interesting real goddamn quick. Well, guys, good news. I guess this is good news. Looks like we're going to finally get some closure on this god-awful framing story. Unfortunately, I care so little about what's going on in this fucking framing story that I just want it to end, and I'd like it to end as soon as possible. This thing sucks. Well, guys, that was VHS Viral. That was, wow, that was something. Let's shut that off. Okay, well, good news is that the streak that this series had built, the streak that the VHS franchise had built itself on, is broken. Because the second story in this was okay. Certainly wasn't the best segment in the film. I'm going to tell you that. In fact, there's only one segment in here I thought was genuinely good. Probably, though, the worst segment is the framing device. The first two films had framing stories of people stumbling on these collections of odd videotapes, and so they decide to just start randomly watching them, and then you get to see what's on these tapes, because each tape is one of these films, done purely in a found footage style. This doesn't have that. Instead, we have a high-speed chase. Our framing device is a high-speed chase. Apparently, every person in Los Angeles has a fucking camera. It doesn't matter if it's a camcorder, doesn't matter if it's a GoPro, doesn't matter if it's like a set of fucking, like one of those friggin' like glasses cameras where they've got a little fucking like lipstick camera on the lens. There actually is a cop who has that, and we even cut to his footage. So everybody has GoPros and cell phone cameras and like glasses cameras, all this other shit, all following this high-speed chase. And then we randomly jump to one of the stories. We jump to one of the stories that actually are the reason why you came here. And you get out of that story, and then we go right back into this fucking high-speed chase, where someone in a fucking ice cream truck is doing laps around Los Angeles, and shit is randomly catching fire, people are randomly getting nosebleeds, but there's nothing to explain any of it. And then we jump to the next story, and then we come back, and then we think that we've jumped into another story when we run into this bunch of Mexicans having a backyard fucking cookout, and a dog gets stabbed, and some guy goes ape shit and kills everybody else. But no, that is still part of the high-speed chase, because that leads to a gas leak in the backyard, and then the house exploding, and it's the big explosion you see from a news chopper as it's trying to follow this high-speed chase. Then we jump into the next story, and then we come back, and then we think that we're back onto another story as some scumbag is trying to videotape a woman stripping inside of a cab, and then she turns it against him. And no, all of that is still part of the high-speed chase, and a car plows into them, and both of them die, and then we're right back into the whole high-speed chase thing. The ending makes absolutely no fucking sense to this idiotic framing, story. And the framing story almost feels like it takes up more time than the fucking stories do. And that shouldn't be. Now, perhaps maybe it's because the framing device is so poorly fucking written that it just drags on, and it feels like it takes forever. But let's skip past the skip past the framing story. Let's talk about let's talk about what we came for, and that is the films themselves. When you go into a VHS movie, you're expecting them to all be found footage. Only one of them actually sticks to the found footage formula and makes it Actually, no, two of them do. Two of them hold up very, very well with the whole, found footage thing. Except one of them does a little bit too much jumping between the two characters. I'm going to give you the premise on that one. This one actually is the second story. The one I thought was going to, absolutely that was just going to be like the low point in this film, because again that was the pattern. It's about this guy who creates a parallel portal, a portal in his basement that opens up into a parallel. It opens up to a parallel world, a mirrored world. And he swaps places with his parallel mirror fucking universe self. And then you find out that the mirror world, every single male has gigantic penis, monsters, and the women have gigantic, monstrous fucking vages. It's very weird. Interesting, weird. I still don't completely understand that one too much, but at least it was good. The best story, I'm going to tell you straight up, is the first one, which has to do with Dante, who is a struggling he was a stage magician who found this cloak that gives him actual magic powers. Except half of it is filmed like a fucking documentary. No, actually, about half of it is filmed like a documentary. The big fight between him and his current fucking assistant is shot like any other kind of action movie, and everything else just happens to be with fucking shaky cam, or there's some kind of a fucking conceit that just happens to put a camera there. I really think that story would have benefited better from being its own feature-length film, because it's really good here. It would probably have been a hell of a lot better if it was able to stretch out to 90 minutes, which is more than I can say about the other stories here. There really aren't a whole lot of stories, guys, because they spend so much time on that goddamn framing device. The final story has to do with a bunch of skateboarders who apparently think that Faces of fucking Death features people on skateboards. Yeah, that actually is that actually was like a throwaway line in the fucking short, and it irritated the shit out of me. Because as a fan of the Faces of Death series, I can tell you there is not a single skateboard to be found in those fucking films. All 4 Faces of Death films, not a single bit of skateboard footage. Yet they say that Faces of Death and Jackass are like the biggest skateboard videos out there. I do know Jackass does feature shit with skateboards. That's why I can't comment on that. Faces of Death doesn't, and it irritated the shit out of me. But anyway, it's basically about these skaters who are trying to make like a viral skating video, and so they go down to Mexico and they sort of get caught up in this whole fucking ritual with cultists whose blood catches fire the moment that it hits air, which is sort of cool. I am going to say that. However, though, that one honestly feels kind of sort of like it drags on a little bit too long. It was totally cool when our 2 skateboarders are able to fight off all of the cultists and run. It was kind of shit when they had to refight the cultists who have now turned into skeletons. That, to me, is there's when that story sort of fell to fucking pieces. But still, it was still fun, and the other 2 stories are certainly fun. It's just that it's the framing device, guys. The framing story of this thing is so ungodly bad that I would not be shocked if that terrible thing would actually chase away viewers. It is that fucking bad. So, writing here, as has been the way with this series, is most certainly a mixed bag, because it all kind of varies from story to story as to your quality. Plus side is, at least the second story, I genuinely was going to call it the second tape, just to kind of stick with the theme of VHS, but since this doesn't feature anybody looking for any fucking tapes, I can't even call it that, because this thing has thrown away almost all pretense of being a proper fucking VHS film, which irritates me a little bit more than almost everything else in this film, save for that goddamn line about Faces of Death. No, guys, I cannot let that go. Just irritates the shit out of me. Anyway, let's skip past writing. I think I've whinged on about writing plenty. What about the acting? Well, once more. Actually, no. Acting, I'm going to tell you, is really good for almost everything, except, again, framing story. There was nothing good about that fucking framing story. I just want to make that point abundantly clear right now. And also the skateboarder one, the acting there kind of sucks. It's pretty obvious that they didn't have a proper script and that the whole thing is completely improv. But these people don't know how to improv, and it just, every line of dialogue from that story sounds so forced. It sounds so unnatural. It sounds so unfucking realistic that it's going to pull, that you really guys are going to struggle to get into the story until they get to Mexico and start fighting cultists. At least that's when it starts getting, interesting. And it stays really solid for like 5 minutes. It's a fun 5 minutes, and I absolutely loved it. It's just that also is when they are doing the least amount of talking. And then, well, the ending comes, and then they have to fight the skeletal cultists, and then the creature that they were trying to either raise or protect or some such shit comes out, but there's no real payoff to that. There's no real ending in that story to speak of, but it still wasn't too bad. The acting, though, is like the one part of that story that kind of brings the whole thing down. Camera work. Remember when VHS was about found footage shit? When you could totally understand if stuff was shaky because it was either in someone's hand, or it was like a GoPro camera, or it was like a surgical optical camera thing. That was one of the stories, I think, in VHS 2. Still probably the best story in all of VHS 2. Most of that is gone. As I stated, our strongest story here is told mostly through documentary. And also the final fight in that story is shot the same way you would shoot a fucking action movie. So we actually have panning shots and sweeping shots and all this shit that absolutely ruins any hope of this thing being seen as a found footage film. And I will say, though, that the camera work utilized in the other two stories are really, really well fucking done. They actually do kind of feel like a found footage thing. And perhaps maybe if the framing story didn't completely insist on jumping to at least 75 different POVs, because apparently, as I stated earlier, every motherfucker in Los Angeles has a goddamned camera, and we jump from all these different cameras, and we get all this, and we get all these weird things, such as cutting back to the very first thing we see, which is our two characters looking over. I guess it's the L.A., fucking river, that weird fucking little, like concrete river in L.A. Looking over that, and we will cut to that every so often. There's mountains of cutaways, distortions, static, all this weird, goofy shit. And it just doesn't feel, right. And it's only in the framing story, which tells me that it is another fault I can heap onto that god-awful fucking framing story. Lighting here in almost every single story is fine. All of it actually looks fucking like realistic, natural. Sound mix. I know, guys, I banged on about the acting in the third story, but god damn it, man, that sound mix was so good. Because they actually used the natural sound that came out of those cameras. So if somebody has a camera mounted on a fucking helmet and it's right here, you will hear that person talking a hell of a lot louder than anybody else talking in that shot, and it's done beautifully. And that is how the sound mix is carried through that entire story. The sound mix in every story is at least decent, including the one that really sucks. I really wish they didn't use that framing story. Jesus. Fuck, was that ever bad. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to try to stop talking about that. Special effects. This film commits a cardinal sin for me. That is CG blood. The plus side is, at least the CG blood here looks passable. I mean, I normally, guys, am willing to just completely savage a film if it's too fucking cheap to use practical blood. This thing, in almost every story, insisted on using at least a few shots involving CG blood, and they at least looked halfway decent, so I'm not going to fault them too much. Just Might have been nicer if we had more practical blood. Which is saying a lot, because there's a ton of practical blood in that third fucking story. It's just when one of the skaters begins shooting the cultists, you'll see these little blasts of CG blood, and it doesn't look as good as the practical blood they used in the scene. It was still halfway decent, but still nowhere near as good as it could have been. Special effects in every other one of them, in every other one of these stories, is pretty good. I will say that as creepy as the demon penis monsters are in the second story, the puppeteering on that is really, really good. And the makeup effects in the second story are really good, and the special effects used in the first story are fantastic. Special effects here, guys, are top-notch. But mind you, nothing in here is as good is anywhere near as good as the effects seen in the first two VHS films. This thing, in terms of special effects, is a huge step down from those previous two films. Now, when all is said and done, I'm able to recommend VHS Viral. Oh boy. If you can rent it, sure. By all means, rent it. If you can buy it for less than $5, $5 is definitely worth the first two stories, and, well, I guess I can throw the third one in there. There's no way I could ever recommend a full price purchase on this because of that framing story. This thing spends so much time on that goddamn story, and it brings the whole fucking film down, okay? It really, really does. Whoever the hell worked on that framing story, you are a talentless piece of shit. And you took a good movie and almost ruined it with your terrible, almost nonsensical storytelling. Now, barring the framing story, I can totally recommend this, at least as a rental. But because that framing story will always be there, to purchase it, it would have to be incredibly low-priced. Otherwise, don't fucking bother. Now, I am going to keep this in my Blu-ray collection because, again, I really liked the three stories here. I'm just going to have to fast forward or chapter skip past that framing story, which is probably going to cut about a third of the film off, which just feels kind of wrong. Anyway, so that actually is kind of sort of a tentative recommendation for this. Now, because it is Fan Appreciation Month, VHS Viral came off the Amazon wish list. The person who sent it in was Thunder X. By all means, guys, please swing on over to his channel. That is youtube.com/user/ThunderXTV. Dude, thank you. I am so happy that I'm still able to watch this series, and I'm able to continue to cover this series with every new entry for this series, and I wouldn't have had the chance to watch this thing if you hadn't have sent it in, and I do thank you for that. It is just sort of a pity that in terms of all three films, this one is probably the weakest out of all three. And that is because one of the most important parts of your fucking anthology film is the weakest point this movie has. But still, solid movie, and it's thanks to you that I had a chance to watch it once more. That is youtube.com/user/ThunderXTV. Now, you know what? It has been a while since I watched VHS and VHS 2. I think I'm going to go and watch the both of those right now, because I went into this wanting to watch found footage, and I didn't get a whole lot of that in my found footage anthology film. In fact, as soon as I'm done with VHS and VHS 2, I may even throw in my copy of Cloverfield, because it's been a long goddamn time since I watched Cloverfield, and Cloverfield is fucking awesome. Anyway, guys, with that, we come to the close of another reaction and review. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and I will see you all in the near future. Peace.